Good afternoon, everyone who have joined. So today's webinar is going to be about ground improvement techniques. Okay, so ground improvement techniques are very relevant in today's construction scenario. And I hope all those who have joined understand the relevance and you are really interested in the topic. Thanks for joining again. And thanks to Skilling too for providing me this opportunity. And ground improvement techniques, it's a rapidly growing field now. A many number of ground improvement techniques have been in existence, but then it's being improved. The existing methods are being improved and also new methods are being devised. Now let's get into the presentation. What you can expect from this webinar. By the end of this webinar, you'd get a good understanding of what is ground improvement, understand why ground improvement is necessary and its relevance in the present scenario. You would also get an overall idea about the various ground improvement techniques that are being used currently. Now, here the flow of the presentation. We'll be going through a slight introduction about the topic, a little bit of how the ground improvement came into existence and why it is necessary, and what do we mean to improve by the ground improvement method. We'll then go through a little case study to understand how ground improvement has saved the structure. We'll also go through various methods of ground improvement. Ground improvement, as many of you might already know, it's a very vast topic, and 1 hour webinar would cover only a very small portion. So I'll try to explain whatever I can within the given time. We'll just go through a few methods, not all the methods, and I'll try to explain few methods in little detail. I'll also be mentioning a few companies if ground improvement techniques interests you. Now onto the introduction. If we try to look into the construction like maybe over a half century ago, if a land was found unsuitable, like the soil investigations conducted on the site was proved that the land was unsuitable for the structure that was intended for the site, then there were like the three options that could follow, that the engineers could follow. They could either abandon the site because free land was plenty, like maybe more than half a century ago. So they could easily abandon the site and choose a more suitable or better site. They could also redesign the foundation structure to distribute the load to the soil to stay safe. As in, if they had planned for a strip footing or an isolated footing, they could redesign it to a raft foundation and then go ahead with the construction. Or if they had found a weaker strata, like say 3 meters or 4 meters below the ground, like a soft clay strata of a thickness of few meters, then they could construct a foundation, like a pile foundation, which could bypass the strata and which could rest on the harder strata below. Now, these practices were followed, and a few years came by, and then the land scarcity posed a problem. Like the construction was in boom, and they had like almost all the suitable in the sense the good land were utilized for construction, and the engineers were forced to work on the unsuitable land to develop them. So abandoning the site was ruled out, and redesigning the foundation also sometimes turned out to be too costly. So they had to devise methods through which the unsuitable land could be made suitable for the construction. So that is how ground improvement came into being, like seriously came into being. So it is, in simple words, improving the soil properties to make an area suitable for construction. Now it's, as I mentioned, it's a quite recent concept as far as the construction industry is concerned. Some possible problems that we come across in sandy soils. Sandy soils are, you can't say they are generally susceptible to liquefaction, but many sandy soils, strata, are susceptible to liquefaction, especially in earthquake prone areas. So that needs a lot of attention. If sandy soil strata is found to be susceptible to liquefaction, some improvement has to be done to the soil before the construction is carried out. Also, sandy soils are found to be unstable in case of slopes or deep excavations, or vertical cuts in pure sands are nearly impossible. Like you can't even cut a meter of vertical cut in sandy soils, pure sands. So in such cases, it becomes necessary that we provide some kind of improvement so that the soil properties are improved and we achieve the necessary properties that we desire. And also, the variation in water table also could pose problems in sandy soils. Variation in water table can also cause liquefaction, can induce liquefaction. Also, the variation in water table could change the effective stress. As the water table rises, the more of the voids would be filled with water, and which would increase the negative pore pressure. And as the negative pore pressure increases, the shear strength decreases, and this has caused, in fact, many landslides and slope failures. Moving on to some possible problems in clay soils. In clay soils, again, low bearing capacity has always been an issue. Clay is always found to have a lower bearing capacity than sandy soils or even silts. Other than very hard or stiff clays, soft clays generally are not preferred for construction as such. And they also have huge settlement issues. If there are unconsolidated or soft clay layers, they have to be treated before construction is carried out. Also, the variation in groundwater table can also cause problems in clay soils. It is especially problematic in case of expansive clays. As the water table rises, the expansive clay absorbs the water and swells up. As the water table retreats, that is in areas where there are huge rainfall, huge rainy seasons, and then followed by extreme summers, the water table retreats or falls down during the summers, and then the expansive clay can shrink and cause settlement issues. Now, what are the changes that we expect through ground improvement? The ground improvement is basically meant to develop or improve the three basic engineering properties of soil, that is the compressibility, permeability, and the shear strength. These are all derived from these properties. Bearing capacity, we need to improve the bearing capacity of soil if it is supposed to support a particular structure. To improve the bearing capacity, we ultimately aim at improving the compressibility and the shear strength of the soil. And if we have to reduce the settlement of the soil, then again the compressibility of the soil needs to be reduced. Permeability is a property that in some cases we want to improve the permeability, and in some cases we want to reduce the permeability. Suppose we are planning a landfill, a site for a landfill, then we want an impermeable barrier so that the leachate, if it comes out of the landfill, it shouldn't pollute the surrounding soil. So in that case, the permeability of the surrounding soil, the soil surrounding the site for the landfill, need to be reduced so that the leachate is not transferred. And in some other cases, for example, when we are trying to consolidate a clay deposit, we need to increase the permeability of the soil, or we have to provide ways in which the water can be expelled from the clay soil faster so that the consolidation is speeded up. Then another change that we need through ground improvement is the susceptibility to liquefaction. I had already mentioned it. If we find that a soil is susceptible to liquefaction, then we have to take measures to reduce the susceptibility, or in fact minimize, or if possible eliminate the possibility of liquefaction through ground improvement techniques. And slope stability is yet another property that we want to improve through ground improvement to prevent the landslides. We know landslides have been a major issue in Kerala and also in many parts of India during the rainy seasons. So we have to make sure the slopes are stable even when the water table rises, or even when the soil gets fully saturated, and this is ensured through the ground improvement. Now let's try to have a look at the case of Leaning Tower of Pisa. We all know about the tower, and we know it's leaning and it is famous, but this was not intended to lean. It is leaning because there was some problems that occurred, or there was some failures, or it didn't fail actually, but it nearly failed. We can say that it nearly failed. I would like to take you through a brief history of what happened there. The construction of Leaning Tower of Pisa began in 1173, and it continued for around 4 or 5 years, and it was stopped. The construction till the 4th floor was carried out during this period, and then it stopped. It is said that it was stopped for some unknown reason. We still don't know why it was stopped, but then it restarted almost 100 years later in 1270. During these 100 years, the tower had in fact settled. The southern side of the tower had settled more than the northern side, and the tower had already started to lean. So when in 1270, when the construction was restarted, the engineers or the masons or the people who were constructing found that the tower was leaning, and they made corrections by themselves. Like they started making the walls on the southern side taller than that on the northern side, so that by the time a floor was completed, the tower would look straight. It was not actually straight. They didn't think about correcting the basic problem, but they thought they would make adjustments and make the tower look perfect. But that didn't work. The construction was again stopped after 6 or 7 years. And this time it was constructed till the seventh cornice. And then again, after a period of 90 years, like around 1370, the construction again started. And this time it was finished in a span of 10 years. The construction was completed till the top of the tower, till the bell chamber. Till 1817, it was not, the leaning was not taken seriously. Leaning of the tower was not taken seriously. In 1817, when they measured the inclination, the tower was inclined 4.9 degrees towards the south. Now, let's have a look at the soil strata below the tower. As you can see, the side which is on the lower end is the southern side, and the other one is the northern side. If you can see, there is a upper sand layer on the left of the screen, like towards the left of the northern side. It was this sand layer that prevented the northern side from settling further, while there was no upper sand layer on the right hand side. So what happened is, it is said that this differential settlement was mainly due to the variation in the groundwater table. So what happened when the groundwater table varied was that on the northern side, because of this upper sand, drainage was good, and the upper clay layer didn't settle much. But on the right hand side, due to the absence of this upper sand layer, the upper clay got softened, and the weight of the tower, because of the weight of the tower, there was differential settlement on the southern side. Now, there were many measures that were taken to correct the tower, and they tried, as I mentioned earlier, they tried increasing the wall height on one side, and then they tried temporary stabilization by adding weights on the northern side, so that even the northern side would settle. Around 100 ton of lead weights were added to the northern side, but even this didn't settle the problem. And in finally around the year 2000, it was decided that soil extraction would be the method to correct the inclination. It was found that if the inclination was not corrected at least by 10%, that is, by the time people started taking this seriously, the inclination had reached 5.5 degrees towards the south side in 1990. Okay, so soil extraction, it was decided that soil extraction would solve the problem. Many numerical analysis were done. Softwares were used. Many trials on the softwares were done. Extensive research was done. What could be done and what would happen if soil extraction was done. And finally, it was fixed that soil extraction would be done. So rather than directly going ahead with the main soil extraction, it was decided to conduct a preliminary soil extraction, like very slowly. In the preliminary soil extraction, 12 boreholes were planned to be dug below the northern side. Each borehole was dug one by one, very carefully, monitoring the settlements and the movement of the tower very carefully. And in the preliminary soil extraction, 20 liters of soil was extracted from the area below the northern side. And it was found that there was no problem that was happening. Everything is under control. So they went ahead with the full soil extraction, and by 21st Feb 2000, they had dug 41 boreholes as a part of the full soil extraction. and in total 50 cubic meters of soil was extracted from below the northern side of the foundation. And if you can see on the screen, there's a red dot, and that is considered to be the center of rotation. The tower was rotating, tower actually rotated about that point. You can also see a dotted circle being shown. That is the path of rotation. And after the soil extraction, it is said that the southern side actually lifted up slightly above the position it was earlier. So that is an example or a case study of how ground improvement saved a structure from failure. So now let's move on to the different methods of ground improvement. First, let's look into the in-situ densification. Then we'll come into pre-compression. In-situ densification and pre-compression both deals with increasing the density of the soil. In-situ densification is but mainly dealing with cohesionless soils or sandy soils, and pre-compression mainly deals with clay soils, and in that case the densification, or the better term is consolidation. That is what happens in pre-compression. Then we move on to the grouting. Grouting is a relatively newer technique and is also being a research topic. And soil stabilization using admixtures and soil reinforcement are the other types of classes of ground improvement. Now, in situ densification techniques, I have shown the list of in situ densification techniques, and blasting is the cheapest in situ densification technique, but it has a few disadvantages, like it is a very noisy technique, and it cannot be performed in congested areas. Blasting can be performed only when blasting and even dynamic compaction, the last that is mentioned. Both of them are noisy techniques and they induce a lot of vibration. So these cannot be performed in areas where there are buildings or structures nearby, because that could be damaging to the structures. So these are generally performed when there is a huge barren land which is to be improved. And blasting is also ineffective in clay soil. And even while densifying, trying to densify a clay, sandy soil strata, if there is an intermediate clay layer, blasting becomes ineffective. And the vibratory probe and vibro compaction, these are similar methods. The difference is that in vibro compaction, extra granular backfill is added into the borehole that is dug, while in vibratory probe, the soil is just densified by vibration. Have a look at the vibro float compaction method, short video. A jet of water is first flushed into the soil to loosen the soil, and then that's the vibro float. It vibrates, and as it vibrates, because the soil is already being loosened by the jet, it penetrates into the soil, and the side jets, which is at very high pressure, tend to densify the soil around the borehole, and as we mentioned, it is backfilled with granular material. And this method again is not suitable for clay soils. This method, when used in clay soils as a method of densification, doesn't work, because with clay soils, the clay just gets washed out by the water, circulating water. See, as the backfill is being dumped, as the vibro float again compacts the backfill as it comes out of the borehole. That's why, and this is the dynamic compaction method. Again, a short video. The blue squares that you saw in the first screen was the areas marked where the weight should fall. This, as I mentioned earlier, is again a method which induces a lot of vibration. As you can see, the cone of vibrations going below as the weight hits the ground. and craters are formed as the weight hits the ground. Once all the craters are done, or all the marked portions are compacted or fell with the weight, the backfilling of the craters is done, and then phase 2 of the dynamic compaction is set out in between the areas which were compacted earlier. So by these two phases, as you can see in the figure on the right, the entire soil strata gets compacted well. There are even overlapping zones where the compaction is very well done. Only a small portion in the upper sand layer remains not uncompacted but not much affected. That is achieved, the compaction of that layer is achieved through roller compaction. Okay, now moving on to the pre-compression methods. Pre-compression, as I mentioned earlier, it is mainly for silts and clays or fine-grained soils where densification is only possible through removal of water. So the various methods are preloading with or without drains. Preloading is providing weight or surcharge or earth fill above the soil strata so as to enable consolidation. Okay, yeah. In addition to providing the preloading, if drains like sand drains or wet drains, that is the prefabricated vertical drains, are provided, then the drainage path becomes shorter and the consolidation is accelerated. We'll have a video on this, a short video again. And then electroosmosis is a very costly method, but it is highly effective. In this method, anodes and cathodes are placed in the soil strata, and the water particles and other positively charged particles in the soil strata move towards the cathode. And the water gets collected at the cathode. But we have to mechanically pump out the water if the method has to be speeded up.